Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you sports information from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @Indus News Sport. That works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, go to the headlines first. And yes, talking about the world of Olympics, Tokyo Olympics 2020 opening ceremony is underway at the Olympic Stadium. Yes, talking about Olympics, the opening ceremony is still underway. However, the creative director is sacked for making Holocaust joke back in 1998. And yes, from the world of NBA, Milwaukee Bucks win their first NBA title since 1971 on Thursday. And yes, from the world of football, Emily Smith-Rowe commits a future to Arsenal by signing a new contract. And yes, we're talking more about the Olympics 2020. Talking about Olympics 2020, looking back into 2020 because of the COVID situation, things were actually falling apart for it. But finally, Tokyo 2020 is underway, and obviously, there's still a lot of question marks with regards to where it's heading because of the fact that, there's so many situations happening. There's so many athletes actually parting ways and not joining the 2020 Olympics. But then there are so many who are actually joining 2020. But anyways, to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Mario Hader, all the way from Germany. Mario, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alamdar. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I hope I'm correct, but I want to say Assalamu alaikum. I hope that was fine for you.
Walaikum assalam, and thank you very much for being a part of the show. So Mario, talking about Tokyo 2020, it's been pretty much controversial with regards to how things are flowing with regards to the Olympics, because there's so many question marks, there's so many questions, there's so many unanswered situations that are flowing in. There are so many athletes who have actually backed out. But how do you see this it finally flowing? Because now the ceremony is underway. How do you see it flowing further? Because there's so many people from their own official teams, not only them, but so many athletes getting COVID-19 positive. So how do you see this flowing, and do you think it would come to a positive conclusion?
I think first of all, we really have to be happy that there is an opening ceremony, because actually it was supposed to be last year, but then we had to wait for a year. And as we all know, all around the world, due to the pandemic, the world is a different place than it was like 2 years ago. So as a sports fan, and you are a sports fan, I am a sports fan, so everyone who's watching the show is a sports fan, I guess. So we should be really happy that there is the Olympics, because that's one of the greatest sporting events that we have on this planet, like the World Cup and the Olympics, and that's the main reason why we love sports. So we should be really grateful that it's finally happening.
True. But besides being grateful, I just want a cutie, because there's so many questions, like I said at the beginning of the show. You've seen so many people getting COVID-19 positive and teams backing out, athletes backing out. How do you think, obviously, how do you think Tokyo 2020 will come to a positive conclusion is one of the major queries, because I still think there's so many questions, answers, but yet again, we don't want to be, or Tokyo 2020 would not want to be the major reason for, spreading or maybe promoting the pandemic as well, because that's one of the major questions for everybody out there. Besides the fact that we are happy about it, how do you see them handling this now?
I think they were really struggling with the decision if there should be fans allowed in the stadiums and on site or not. First of all, it was like no fans, then there was Japanese fans would be allowed to go. Now there's no fans, and I personally think you can argue that it's a big difference, because when we have a look back, like 2 weeks ago, there was Wembley Stadium in London during the during the European Championships in football. It was fully packed almost. There were 60,000 people, and now there's no one allowed. So that's a bit of an argument that we can have. But from the COVID standpoint, of course, it's a better idea without fans, because you don't want to have many COVID cases around the world because of the Olympics. That's the worst thing that could happen. I think the athletes, of course, they are supposed to be there, and when they're out of the Olympics, I think they have to travel back home immediately. So they are trying to take care of the risk, let's put it that way.
Obviously, as you said it yourself, because we want Tokyo Olympics to actually happen, because, because of the COVID situation, we have actually been into a turmoil in terms of sports. But yet again, if we talk about like major names, if I look back into like tennis stars, a lot of people, if I'm not wrong right now, there's so many people out there who actually wanted to be a part of it. There were so many people who actually landed in Tokyo, but those athletes and their team actually turned out COVID positive and they had to go back. So it is still a tricky thing. I understand what you're saying in terms of Euro 2020. It surely was, my question mark was there in terms of Euro 2020 because realistically, there's so many cases after Euro 2020 happening. But you still think, when we talk about Olympics, it's like a responsible Olympian perspective and a platform for people out there. So my question still remains, I know they will try their level best, but how far will they go to contain the situation where the virus cannot be spreaded?
I think they will take care of everything that they can take care of. But as we all know, around the world, it's not easy to take care of a virus. That's
right.
Why we are in this situation for, I don't know, more than 12 months, 18 months almost. That's a big issue around the world. Of course, that's the biggest issue that we have on this planet right now. And of course, as we love sports, but the Olympics is not as big as the coronavirus. So it will not stop because of the Olympics. So of course, everyone in Tokyo, especially the IOC, they have to take care of the virus as good as they can. And I think they're trying, they're testing, they are banning the fans from the events. But as you said, Alamdar, of course, you're right. There are many players, especially tennis players, they decided not even to go there because they just don't want to do it.
Right.
Because it's not a Grand Slam tournament. Of course, it's one of the biggest, but it's not a Grand Slam tournament. There are no fans. And some players just didn't want to do it. Of course, Novak Djokovic, he does want to do it because he wants to win the Golden Slam if he wins the US Open eventually this year. I think there's always a risk, and then you have to decide, do I want to take the risk or is it too much? Is the bar too high for me? And
there's so many ups and downs happening with Tokyo 2020, with the Olympics. So like my question still remains, how do we see this expediting as maybe a positive event for the rest of the world?
We have to be honest, the whole world is still watching the Olympics.
Right.
Because people around the world, they love sports. My personal opinion in the beginning of the year was like, I don't think that the Olympics is going to happen. And
right.
I thought Euro 2020 is also maybe not going to happen. And if it is, without fans, of course, there was no doubt about it. So I was really surprised that there were so many fans allowed at Euro 2020, but I'm not surprised that there are no fans allowed in Tokyo. And I think that is, if the games are going to happen, that is the right decision, that there are no fans allowed because of the virus.
Right. And Mario, the story that I've heard so far, and the people that I've spoken to who are actually representing Olympics, we have come up to a conclusion, at least my side of the story, or what I've been told so far is, all the athletes are only allowed to go do their thing and go back to the hotel. They're not allowed to be out there sightseeing, nothing of the sort. And not only that, staying away from external people, interacting with people, which is a solid plan. But the point is, I'll just give you one example. If we talk about Pakistan itself, we had this series called PSL in terms of cricket. The point was that, we interacted, the team interacted, started interacting with people. And what happened was the COVID-19 breach happened and, we halted because, the team started having those COVID-19 symptoms. So it is still tricky. If we talk about British #1, out there, who wanted to be a part of it, the whole troop actually went back, because she could not be a part of it because of the fact that, it was not on. It was Dan Evans, if I talk about her, if I talk about him, or Joanna Konta, because the point is they all went through the COVID situation. So like I said,
yes,
it is tricky. Everybody wants sports, and I absolutely appreciate your enthusiasm for it. But, the only thing we can do is maybe we can pray that, things would be probably at the end of it all in control.
Absolutely. That's what I've been saying, because the Olympic Games, they can be a success, maybe not as the Olympics before the pandemic. Of course, this is a totally different situation. But if Tokyo 2020 is going to be successful, then it's because there are no or almost no COVID cases. I don't want many COVID cases to happen in Tokyo, and that's crucial for the event. That's what I'm saying. And of course, I fully understand your point, and you're absolutely right. And I'm not that enthusiastic that it's going to happen. Just from a sports fan, it's always nice to watch sports. As we are.
To be honest, I'll be honest, Mario, I respect, I know, honestly, talking to you about this whole situation, I'm glad that, you brought this up, and I'm glad with the enthusiasm that you're carrying in terms of the Olympics, and, you're talking about it, because as much as you want it, I know all viewers out there want it, because Olympics is a big name. So, in short, all I would say is thank you so very much for being a part of the show and discussing the world of Olympics, and thank you for your positivity.
Thank you very much for having me. Kuda Hafiz. I hope that was correct.
Thank you. Thank you. So, that was an in-depth analysis from Mario. And yes, he obviously talked about the in-depth situation of, 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Yet again, we still hope for the best in terms of the whole situation. Let's hope the Olympics come out executing-wise perfect, spick span, not spreading virus. Let's hope everybody stays safe out there. Anyways, what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and once we get back from the break, there's more coming from the world of sports. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, we were talking about Olympics 2020. But as you know, we talk about sports from all across the globe. Big news, yes, the big news is obviously in terms of the NBA side. Finally, it come up to a point that Milwaukee Bucks finally managed to get their championship, after 1971. And to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Seth Partlow, who's actually been a director of the basketball research for the Milwaukee Bucks. Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here, and just to make sure your viewers are aware, I'm no longer with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah. Obviously, I mentioned you were, but yet again, it's all right. The point is, for me, to be very honest, in terms of how I've seen them growing to where they are right now, I would rather want to have your in-depth analysis on how they worked to where they are, and finally grabbing the finals and grabbing the NBA championship. How do you see their story? Because you would probably know the in-depth analysis because you've been with them from 2016 to 2019. So how do you see them growing to where they are now?
I think it's a pretty great example of the importance of experience in sort of building towards a championship. It's not something I necessarily believed was a real thing. It's a narrative that is commonly portrayed. Oh, you have to fail before you succeed. But from when we went to the conference finals in 2019, I sort of felt the difference in how the game was affecting, both the players, the coaches, and in the front office. And going through that experience the first time was, I think, pretty vital in learning how to overcome obstacles in the playoffs this year for the team. I mean, they came back from a 2-0 deficit in 2 different series this postseason, and I don't think that happens if you haven't had the experience of coming up against those obstacles and overcoming.
Right. Seth, I would also want to ask you in terms of how Giannis, if you look back into his transition, because if you look back into his injury to begin with, that was like one serious injury. Even if I look at it, I feel injured on my own knee. You know what I'm trying to say? So the point is, it was really, really horrible. But for someone like him making a comeback, but he did make a comeback in the first and the second game, but obviously the Bucks were not at their forefront, or they were not at the fire, you know what I mean? But after that, I think the leadership, the ultimate quality of the team itself, how they all led the entire team together. I think it's remarkable in terms of their existence as a team together, and I think it will definitely go a long way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about certainly at least the first game, and then for the first half of the second game, is he sort of played like he wasn't totally sure his knee was okay.
Right.
And then at a certain point in the second half of the second game, it sort of left his mind that he had been injured, and from there he put on one of the great finals performances of all time, culminating obviously in scoring 50 points in really just a magnificent performance in the clinching sixth game.
Right. And Seth, to be honest, thank you for, raising the point, because I still remember the first two games. Giannis was trying his best, but he was limping. I don't know, a lot of people were not probably noticing it, but each and every game, I was following each and every game. And I started following Bucks when I saw them winning against Brooklyn Nets at a point when Brooklyn Nets were like the gods, So the point is, I still see, but I still respect Brooklyn Nets. They have their own capacity, but yet again, for Bucks right now to be where they are, and for Giannis, to be honest, his conviction, his dedication to the goal that he wanted to achieve, and he did, I think is definitely going to be something that's going to be remembered in the world of sports.
I think that I'm glad you brought that up in terms of him focusing on the goal. One of the big weaknesses of his game has been free throw shooting, and then in the final game, he made 17 of 19, and basically all of them mattered. And that there's no kind of better example of coming up against an obstacle and overcoming than just you're one of your absolute weaknesses as a player and turning that into a strength at the time when it mattered most.
Right, and if you talk about the Suns itself, the Suns were like the spot-on team. I used to have a lot of word with different NBA experts and talk about how things are developing, and obviously they were I still think they're a brilliant team. But the point is, nobody actually vouched for Bucks. But how? And I used to argue with all my guests here, and I would talk to them about I understand that Suns is pretty awesome in terms of their way, but Bucks can do it. But the point is, looking into how they got, I still think it's going to be an example for not only, because a lot of people were like they're new, they're fresh, they still have a long way to. I had people telling me maybe somewhere in 2025 they will get there, But now for them, there's a big, in terms of their achievement. Let's talk about the Bucks' achievement right now. I think they know, and they've managed to bring and put a full stop to all those people who were talking against them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been certainly there's been questions about whether the coach Mike Budenholzer could make the right adjustments in the playoff setting, and I think he answered most of those questions in this playoffs. Obviously, answered them to the point where they won the championship, and it's definitely been the culmination of building towards this with both Giannis and. You have to mention Chris Middleton, who's been a key part and really a key partner for Giannis, both in terms of on the floor, but also sort of the off the floor culture of the team. He's a very different personality than Giannis, but a very solid, steady, reliable player who, both in this playoff run and in the past has made just an incredible number of tough clutch shots at the end of close games.
Right. So, Seth, I would probably want to know more in depth if you want to share some stuff in terms of your experience from 2016 to 2019, obviously with Milwaukee Bucks, in terms of how things were back then and how you see. Obviously, I understand the whole situation in terms of being a basketball research individual, but how do you see them now and how do you see them back then? I'm sure there would be ups and downs again, but how do you see them evolving to where they are right now?
It's been pretty incredible. When I joined the team, Giannis was just coming off. He had finally, over the last 20 or so games of the previous season, the 2015-16 season, right, he had just started to emerge as a top player. And we were thinking, hey, this guy's pretty good. He's going to be an all-star soon, we think, maybe. But the growth from being a pretty good, interesting player to being one of the best 3 or 4 players in the world, I don't think it was something we saw coming as fast as it did. And that certainly over the course of my first year or two with the team, that very much changed what we thought we could be. You have one all-star, you think you can be, okay, we can be a playoff team, we can be pretty good. You have an MVP and well, we need to go to win the championship, because if you don't reach that level, then it almost lessens the achievement of the player winning the MVP. And, you know, if you have a player of that stature, you know you have a chance. And of starting in around 2017, 18, the moves were made with the idea of not just becoming a good team, but becoming a championship team. And, you know, the right pieces around. I think for this year's team, the addition of Drew Holiday was obviously that final piece to give them to give that one more certainly spectacular defensive player who also contributed on offense and was a real key towards winning this final series, was a real key towards turning this final series around. So but I do want to emphasize just the transformation in Giannis from an exciting prospect to an all NBA level player over the course of about 18 months was really exciting to watch and be a small part of.
Right. And Seth, to be very honest, because I've viewed the whole team, I've been going through their own stance in every possible way. If I look into the whole situation, if you remember when Giannis had that injury, there was obviously that game was obviously a disaster in terms of morale, in terms of, you know, everybody losing hope. The whole team was gone. They could not even shoot. I remember that game. But after that, I remember the team still buckling themselves up, going for it and scoring and winning. You know what so my objective or my question would be to you right now. For instance, if this were an injury that was really, really tough on Giannis and he could not actually be at the playoffs finals, how would things be for Bucks?
I think it would have been a very different series if you have, you know, the best player in the series is taken away. I think it's a very different look. I will say that the way the Bucks played in games 5 and 6 against Atlanta after the injury was pretty impressive. I think part of it was by that point they knew that they didn't know whether Giannis would be able to come back this season, but I think just knowing that he had avoided a very serious injury,
right.
When that injury happened, it wasn't just the worry that he wasn't going to be able to come back for this year's playoffs. The worry was he's going to miss the entirety of next season as well, and you know the swing in sort of emotions in both around the team and in the city from that worrying that he's out for you know a year.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. You know, thank you, Seth, for bringing it up, because that's exactly what I thought, and I think all the viewers out there who were questioning all were thinking that, you know, maybe Giannis is not going to make it to the finals.
But the difference between that, okay, maybe he'll play halfway through the finals. No, he's ready for game 1, and he wasn't. As you mentioned earlier, he wasn't. He didn't fully look like himself in game 1, and as someone who's watched him a ton over the last several years, even into game 2 and maybe even in game 3, there were certain moves that he likes to do that he was sort of not totally trusting his knee. Right. And then again by game 4, it was no.
But I think at the end of it all, Seth, I think we all are glad for the fact that, you know, now they're the champions, and you know, simple. So anyways, thank you so very much, Seth, for being a part of the show and discussing the in-depth analysis of the NBA Finals with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. That was Seth, and obviously he talked about the in-depth analysis of how things were in terms of the NBA Final. And yes, Milwaukee Bucks finally managed to be the champions, to be precise. But and this has actually happened since 1971. And once again, a heartiest congratulations to them. But anyways, we're going to talk about the next news, which is from the world of football. Just want to give you guys a quick overview. Emile Smith-Rowe actually commits the future to Arsenal for signing a new contract, because, you know, he had to renew the contract, and finally the contract has been renewed. The Arsenal midfielder signs a long-term contract. So things would probably, you know, it's a 5-year contract. Hopefully things will shape up better for him in terms of that. And Roy has actually been handed the number 10 shirt for the season 2021 and 22. But anyways, this is pretty much from the world of sports. If you guys want to reach out to us, you can on a social media handle, which is @Indus News Sports. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.